I'll be reading 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elijah replied. "You have asked a difficult thing," Elijah said. "Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours, otherwise it will not."
Good morning. Howdy. Somebody was excited. His name is Nathan. Well, if you are visiting us this morning, we're honored to have you. And if you're just here, hey, guess what? We're glad you're here. This church, I was going to say it's like a family, but God tells us it is a family. And I'm reminded that every week when we gather together and grow each other and love on each other. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to do so and to gather people and worship our God. We've been going through a series in the Old Testament. And it's this idea of looking for Jesus in the Old Testament. Sometimes it's a clear illusion. Sometimes it's just setting up the character of God that we'll see unfold in the story of God. We left off in 1 Kings. We're in 2 Kings this week. And as we leave off, the kingdom is in pieces. Solomon's wisdom, as we see, turned to folly. His heart is divided by foreign wives and the foreign gods. The United Kingdom splits, 10 tribes north, 2 south, and both are spiraling toward exile. Here's what I want you to notice first as we open up 2 Kings. Every king that follows carries the same verdict. Now, we're not going to spend all of our time this morning looking at all the lessons from the kings of Israel. But I do think there's a lesson there from the kings of Israel. As with most of the time, the way that you shortcut to some of the most impactful parts of the Old Testament are to look for repetition. When you see repetition, it's very important. I'm going to show you an example this morning. Jeroboam, as we leave off in 1 Kings 14:6, did evil in the sight of the Lord and made Israel to sin. Rehoboam, this is at least from 2 Chronicles, he did evil because he did not set his heart to seek the Lord. Remember how important that word heart is to 1 Kings. When it comes to King Ahab, there was no one who sold himself to do what was evil like Ahab did. 1 Kings 21:25. Ahaziah, this is Ahab's son, he did evil. He walked in the way of his father and mother. Jehoram clung to the sins of Jeroboam, 2 Kings 3:3. This is where you're going to notice the theme. Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam, 2 Kings 10:29. Jehoash did what was evil. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, 2 Kings 13:2. Jeroboam II, he did what was evil. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, 2 Kings 15:4. Menahem, he did what was evil. He did not depart all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, 2 Kings 15. Pekahiah, he did what was evil. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, 2 Kings 15:24. Pekah did what was evil, 2 Kings 15:28. Hoshea, the last king of Israel, did what was evil, yet not as the kings before him. King after king, failure after failure, and the pattern is self-evident. Now, we're also introduced to Hezekiah and Josiah. And I do think that there are some glimpses of Jesus here. I'll just mention the passage. It's not the main thrust of the sermon today. Hezekiah was a mediator, very clearly seen in Jesus. And Josiah cleansed the temple. And you can think of the time that Jesus did that at the beginning of John and at the end of the Synoptics. Something is shifting in the book, though. You see this theme of the failure of the leadership of the kings. And when this human leadership is shown to collapse, God raises up a different kind of leader. Not a king with a crown, but a prophet. A prophet that has, in some sense, spirit. This first one, or the one we'll look at, is Elisha. If you read his story carefully, you'll see the shadow, I think, of Jesus. This will be what we're looking at in 2 Kings today. At some of the things from the life of Elisha. 2 Kings chapter 2. I'll give you a second to turn there. 2 Kings chapter 2. And it came about when the Lord was about to take up Elijah by a whirlwind to heaven, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Jump down to verse 8. Elijah, the verse former prophet, took his mantle and folded it together and struck the waters. They were divided here and there, so that the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed over, Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." And Elisha, this is the latter, the second, said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." Now that's an interesting phrase, the double portion of your spirit. This is not the first time that some of these are introduced in the scripture. For example, I hope when the waters are parted, you think back to some of the imagery that we've looked at so far in the Old Testament. This is the third time now that it's happened. Second, though, is this language of the double portion. If you look at Deuteronomy 21 and verse 17, it is the firstborn that received a double portion. Elisha is asking to be a true successor to Elijah. Now he is given this blessing. He is given this anointing of Elijah's spirit. It's seen in the fact that Elisha does twice as many signs and wonders of Elijah. This happens at the Jordan River. Elijah strikes the water, it parts, they cross on dry ground, focusing with Moses in the Red Sea, and this is Joshua again, entering the Promised Land. The Jordan keeps showing us places where God transitions his people to something new. So we're here, 2 Kings chapter 2, and this is Elijah's response to that request for a double portion. He said, "You have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be so." I want to be very clear. Hopefully you understood what that means. Elijah says, if you see me when the Lord takes me up, the thing that you've asked for will happen. If you don't see me, it won't. As they were going along and talking, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind to heaven, and Elisha saw it and cried out, "My father, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." And he saw Elijah no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. He also took up the mantle of Elijah that fell from him, and returned and stood by the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him and struck the waters and said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And when he also had struck the waters, they were divided here and there, and Elisha crossed over. So, hopefully it's very clear what happened. Elisha asks for a double portion. Elijah says, if you see me when I'm taken up, you'll get the double portion. He's taken up. Elisha picks up his coat. He picks up his mantle. He picks up that which Elijah girded himself with. And then he struck the waters. This is the second time this has happened in the chapter. But the first time Elijah did it. The second time Elisha did it. The idea is Elisha does have the spirit of Elijah. To say it even clearer, we're given it explicitly in the text. Now when the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho opposite him saw him, they said, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." And they came to meet him and bowed themselves to the ground before them. Now, there's a few things other than the references backwards that are interesting to me here in 2 Kings. Instead of looking backwards, I want us to fast forward. Fast forward 800 years. Another man comes to the Jordan River, but his name is not Elisha. His name is John and Jesus. Jesus comes to the river. He doesn't come to just receive power. At least in some sense, he comes to identify with the commandment of God and with the people that he was there to mediate for. But watch what happens. This is in Matthew 3 and verse 16. When Jesus was baptized, immediately he went up from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and resting on him. At the same Jordan River, a spirit falls on Jesus. Not the spirit of Elijah, like Elisha. And just so you know, Elijah and John are connected. Elijah's the forerunner, John's the forerunner. Elisha is the one who comes with a double portion. Jesus is the one who comes and gets the full Spirit of God that never leaves him. When Elijah is taken up, I don't know if you caught it in verse 12 of 2 Kings chapter 2, Elisha says, my father, my father. That's what the text says when Elijah's taken up. When Jesus is baptized, it's not him that does the speaking, it's the Father who speaks from heaven. It's the very next verse in Matthew 3, verse 17. My beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hopefully you see at least a little bit of a pattern. The connection runs deep. Elijah and John the Baptist, both wilderness prophets, preparing the way. Elisha and Jesus, both receiving the Spirit to begin their ministry of signs and wonders. Elisha asked for the Spirit and received the portion. Jesus is the Spirit-anointed one, receiving not the portion, but the fullness. This sets the stage for Elisha as a Jesus figure, somebody who really sets the way for us to compare him to Jesus and see how Jesus is better. We can say today that something greater than Elijah is here. Something greater than Elisha is here. Turn with me to chapter 4. Chapter 4. In chapter 4, we see 3 of these miracles. 3 of these signs and wonders. The first one is in verses 1 through 7. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor has come to take my 2 children and be his slaves. So I want you to first think about the predicament this woman is in. As you read through the work of Elisha, I think you should notice the amount of people who are on the fringe, the amount of people who are marginalized in the eyes of Israel that Elisha is there for. This is a woman who lost her husband. He died. She's a widow, a mother of 2 children, and her children are going to be taken away as slaves by her creditor. Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? And she said, your maidservant has nothing in the house except a single jar of oil. Lost my place. Then he said, go borrow vessels at large for yourself from all your neighbors, even empty vessels. Do not get a few. And you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour into all these vessels, and you shall set aside what is full. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there is not one vessel more. And the oil stopped. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest. So I just want to be very clear that you understand what happened. I'm sure you are following. There was one single container of oil. The prophet says, go get as many containers as you can. It doesn't matter if they're empty. Get as many He tells her to pour the one container into all the empty containers. And one by one, that one fills up, and that one fills up, and that one fills up. And every container is filled up from the one until she's all the way out. Hold that in a place in your mind. The pattern knows emptiness becomes abundance when placed in God's hands. The next section, okay, there's, we'll read verse 8. Now there came a day when Elisha passed over to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she persuaded him to eat food, and so it was. As often as he passed by, he turned there to eat food. She said to her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God passing by us continually. You can continue reading. We're going to jump to verse 16. And he said, At this season next year you will embrace a son. She said, No, my Lord, O man of God, not like your maidservant. The woman conceived and bore a son at that season in the next year, as Elisha had said to her. When the child was grown, the day came that he went out to his father, to the reapers. He said to his father, My head, my head. And he said to his servant, Carry him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her lap until noon and then died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door behind him and went out. She called to her husband and said, Please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and return. He said, Why will you go him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It will be well. Then she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, Drive and go forward. Do not sit down in the place for me, unless I tell you. So she went and came to the man of God to Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi, his servant, Behold, there is the Shunammite. Please run now to meet her and to her, and say to her, Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, It is well. And she came to the man of God on the hill. She caught hold of his feet, and Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is troubled within her, and the Lord has hidden it from me, and has not told me. Now, we're not going to read through the whole thing. I want you to read through the end, but I'm going to summarize what happens. It's back to the house, and what's going to happen is he raises this boy from the dead. The way that he does it is he lays on him, touches him, his eyes are on his eyes, nose on his nose. He's right there over him, and he raises him. Hold that one in your mind. Jump further in the chapter. Okay, 2 Kings, same chapter, the third one. You can start in verse 38. Okay, when Elisha returned to Gilgal, there was a famine in the land, a very common theme that we should have been noticing so far in the Old Testament. As the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, he said to his servant, Put on the large pot and boil the stew for the sons of the prophets. They went out to the field, sometimes they gathered herbs. They didn't realize that some of the things they gathered were poisonous, and they make the stew. They said, There's death in the pot. Oh no, what are we going to do? He takes care of it. He adds flour to it. He says, verse 41, Bring meal. He threw it into the pot and said, Pour it out for the people that they may eat. Then there was no harm in the pot. Verse 42, it continues. Now a man came from Baal Shalasha and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, fresh ears of grain in his sack. Okay. So 20 loaves, and as you read through the text, I'm going to summarize just for time's sake, he's going to feed over 100 men in the first 43. Now here's our point of going through all this. Hopefully bits and pieces of that, as you heard, you think about the ministry of Jesus. You think about, for the first miracle in sign, the time that Jesus broke the bread, had his disciples pass it out. And how much did they gather? 12 full bags. There was more than enough. There was more than enough to feed at the end, even more than there was at the beginning. Okay. The second one, hopefully you think of Jairus' daughter who dies. Maybe in Luke 8 is one of the accounts, 49 through 56. It's a little different when Jesus does it, though. Jesus takes her by the hand and says, Child, arise. He doesn't have to lay on her. Doesn't have to be eye to eye, nose to nose, mouth to mouth. He just says, child, arise. Where Elisha needs desperate prayer and full body contact, Jesus simply speaks. When you read this, the third one, of the 20 loaves of bread to feed over 100 men, right? That's a miracle. Pretty amazing. But then you compare it to what happened to Jesus. In John 6, there are 5,000 hungry people. And how many loaves of bread? Not 20, but 5 barley loaves. Same pattern, barley bread and possible odds. There's leftovers collected, but there's a difference. Elisha feeds 120. Jesus feeds 5,000 with 5. All throughout 2 Kings, there's a hint. We don't even know it yet. We have no idea. But there's a hint of Jesus that when we see it in his ministry, looking back, we can say something greater than Elisha is here. Now, hopefully you're still seeing the theme of foreigners and marginalized are those that are being reached by Elisha. This doesn't get lost in 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man with his master, and highly respected, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. There was also a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. Now the Arameans had gone out to the bands and taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, I wish that my master were the prophet who is in Samaria, then he would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus spoke the girl who was from the land of Israel. The king of Aram said, Go now, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. He departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold and 10 changes of clothes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, And now as this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy. So again, a little bit of context. Naaman is from where? Did you catch where he was from? Aram. Not an Israelite. Was a Syrian. There was an Israelite servant girl in the house who knew of the power of God and knew of Elisha. She said, I wish we could get there. I wish we could get to this prophet. Naaman, if you could sum it up, is everything Israel hates. A successful Syrian general winning battles against God's people. Do you think God has anything to do with this guy? Do you think that's where the story is going at all? It completely boggles your mind. Completely makes you scratch your head. Verse 8, it happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent word to the king, saying, Why have you torn your clothes? Now let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean. But Naaman was furious, and went away and said, Behold, I thought, he will surely come out to me, and stand, and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place, and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. So what happens is he comes to the prophet, but he doesn't like the advice he gets. The prophet doesn't even come out to him. He sends his own servant and says, Here's what you do. Just go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your leprosy will be completely taken care of. And he said, I thought something big would happen. I thought something crazy would happen. And the servants are the ones that had talked sense to him. We haven't got there yet. They said, if he asked you to do something great and amazing and profound, wouldn't you do it? So wouldn't you just do something as simple as dipping in the water of the Jordan 7 times? Eventually, Naaman humbles himself. He dips 7 times, and the text says his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child. The general declares, not the Israelite general, but the Syrian general, Now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now, what makes this one interesting is we can see clearly the overlap of Elisha in the Old Testament and Jesus in the New. But this is one of the ones that Jesus specifically mentions. He specifically calls back to Naaman. in Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4. Let's read verse 17. The book of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him, and he opened the book and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord." So Jesus says that this scripture is fulfilled today in your ears. The very scripture that prophesies of the year of Jubilee, that prophesies that there's going to be somebody that comes and does all this, that's free the captives, the poor, the blind, the oppressed, and so on. The people aren't happy, but then where we're getting to is verse 24. And he said, "Truly I say to you, no prophet is welcome in his hometown." What's the idea here? He appears, he comes first to Israel. They don't hear it. They don't want to have anything to do with him. He says that a prophet is not received in his hometown. "I say to you in truth, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when a great famine came over all the land. And yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow." Elijah the prophet doesn't come to a rich, uppity-nosed Israelite. He comes to a poor widow of Zarephath. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. Same case. Many Israel. Some of them were from, many lepers, some of them were from Israel. But who's the one that's written about in 2 Kings? Strangely enough, it's the guy from Syria, the very general who spent his time warring against Israel. Scratch your head about the story God is telling, because sometimes it doesn't make sense until you get to the end and see what he is doing through Jesus. The point cuts deep. I mean, it really should scare people to go to church every week and want to do the thing that God has asked us to do. You can want it, you can think you're doing it, and you can miss this point that Jesus is saying, that the insiders get it wrong all the time. And sometimes it's the outsiders that see what God is really doing. Sometimes it's the widow of Zarephath. Sometimes it's Naaman the Syrian. You see this pattern all throughout the New Testament. You read through Matthew chapter 8, okay? Just very short context of Matthew. Matthew is the gospel account that's written to Jews and Jewish Christians. It starts off with a strong statement about Jesus. This is the book of the generations of Jesus, the son of David, the son of Abraham. You know the prophecies, you know the promises, you know he's coming. And then it goes on to explain how he's like Moses and he fulfills all of these prophecies in the Old Testament. And then yet in the very same book you see over and over and over, they wouldn't get to the point. They would not receive the prophet. It wasn't always an Israelite that had faith. Sometimes it was a centurion faith that amazes him in Matthew. In Matthew chapter 8 and verse 10. Just to be very clear, I'm saying that like we all know what it means. A centurion is not a Jew. A centurion is a Roman soldier. It was a Roman soldier that had faith. Or sometimes it was the Samaritan leper. What makes Luke interesting is Luke is very similar in the way that he covers. Almost every unique story in Luke that's not in the other Gospels has to do with a minority figure. There's women that are mentioned in Luke that aren't mentioned in the other Gospels. There's stories about poor and riches that are mentioned in Luke that aren't mentioned in the other Gospels. This is one of those. There is a Samaritan leper. There are 10 lepers that Jesus cleanses. And which one comes back? I'm not asking you to think back. Which one comes back and thanks Jesus? Not the Israelite leper. The one out of 10. The one Samaritan leper. God's grace has always been interested in reaching the unlikely just as much as the likely. He comes to everybody, but especially the people that you don't think that he's coming for. Maybe we've just grown used to this. Maybe we just know that's who Jesus is, that Jesus is for everybody. But it is a shocking revelation to the people in the first century. Back to 2 Kings. 2 Kings in chapter 6. Kings chapter 6. Second Kings is another one of the chapters with two of the signs and wonders. The first one is that they're cutting down trees to build a new place for the sons of the prophets. Okay? And the axe head falls off in the water, and Elisha makes it float to the top. Okay? An iron axe head, verse 6. But keep reading past that, verse 8. Now the king of Aram was warring against Israel. And he counseled with his servants, saying, in such and such place shall be my tent. The man of God sent word to the kings of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there. The king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned, so that he guarded himself there more than once or twice. Bear with me on this one. Now the heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this thing. And he called his servants and said, will you tell me which of us is for the king of Israel? One of his servants says, no, my lord, O king. But Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. So he said, go and see where he is, that I might send and take him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. He sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night to surround the city. Now when the attendant of the man of God had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servants said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? So just pause for a second. The king of Aram heard the news that Elisha had sent ahead. And he's very upset. So what does he do? He goes and he's going to take Elisha by force, and he's going to take him and make him watch the destruction of Israel. He's there in Dothan with a great army. Elisha is circled around. And hopefully you don't know what happens, because that makes it more fun. What do you think happens? Just think about it as we continue reading. Pick up in verse 16. So he answered, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. The Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw. Behold, the mountain was full of horses, and chariots of fire all around Elisha. When they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people with blindness, I pray. So he struck them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. Then Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he brought them to Samaria. When they had come into Samaria, Elisha said, O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. And the king of Israel, when he saw them, said to Elisha, my father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? He answered, you shall not kill them. Will you kill those you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master, and the marauding bands of the Arameans did not come again into the land of Israel. So think about it. Think about what happens. Two interesting things that point us to Jesus. First is the power that he had to cause the seeing to be blind and the blind to see. I hope you notice that as we read. The first thing he did to the servant said, you don't see what I see. You don't see what's really present in the land. Not just their horses and chariots, but the horses and flaming chariots of God, the angel armies that surround the land. You don't see it. The second thing that he does, he takes those from Aram, from Syria, and he blinds them, and he takes them to Samaria. And then when he takes them there, you think what's going to happen is that he's going to kill them. He's going to have to be killed. And instantly, mercy. You think he's going to kill the army that is trying to attack Israel, but he gives them a feast instead. These are very abstract, but I think in one more way, these point us to Jesus. I think back to John 9, when Jesus gives sight to a man born blind. I know it's literal, I know it's slightly different. But then the Pharisees are so confident in what they see with their eyes. And Jesus says it's the Pharisees that see that are blind. The blind lead the blind. They don't know. The deaf lead the deaf, and so forth. In the second place, Jesus never, ever kills the Pharisees. I know that even sounds strange to say, because we know Jesus well enough, we don't expect him to kill the Pharisees. But he's the Son of God, he's a prophet, does miracles, can do what he wants, but does he kill the Pharisees? What about when the Pharisees are arresting him? What about when the Jews and the Romans are giving him a trial of which he is an innocent man? What does Jesus do? He takes him to the cross. I know we say this verse. They take him to the cross with this verse almost every week, but Jesus says, Father, what? Forgive them. It's numb on our ears. I think how amazing that is. That Jesus is killed by these people for their own lives. They don't even know it. They're blind to what's happening. He's doing it for them. And he says, Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. And that's to the Romans, and that's to the Jews, and that's to you, and that's to me, and that's to every sin that's ever been. Jesus died, and he looks at it with grace and mercy, not with vengeance. There are more all throughout 2 Kings. I know we're out of time. Here's the point, though. Over and over in different ways, Elisha does amazing, miraculous things. But they're eclipsed. They're so minor compared to the things that Jesus does. We mentioned them just enough to really show the novelty, but I hope you'll go and dig in deeper. Throughout all of these in the narrative, there's a question hanging in the air. The same question that's haunted every book we study. Is this the one? Noah saved his family, but couldn't even save them from sin or the rest of the world. Moses led the people out, but couldn't lead them in. Joshua brought them to rest, but it wasn't permanent. They would go into exile. David was a great king, but his throne crumbled. Solomon had wisdom, but his heart was divided. Elisha had the double portion, but he was only a shadow. Each one pointed to, each one whispered, I'm not the one, but he's coming. He's not here yet. And then one day, this shadow gives way to substance. John the Baptist, an Elijah figure in his own right, sees a man at the Jordan. The Spirit descends, and the Father's voice thunders, This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. The Gospel writers tells us, this is the Son of David. This is the Son of Abraham. This is the one that was promised. He doesn't just receive the Spirit, but gives it. He doesn't just heal the outsiders, but he builds an entire humanity from them, a whole new family. He doesn't just multiply bread, but he says, I am the bread of life. He doesn't just raise the dead, but he defeats death forever. Jesus is the King who will not fail. What Scripture is teaching us as we read, especially through this Old Testament, is not that we need to try to do what they did harder. We don't need to try to have the law better than they had the law. We don't need to try to have a king better than the kings they had. I fear that's one of the mistakes that we make as we read through the Old Testament. It is for our learning, it is a lesson, but that's not the lesson. The lesson is that Jesus is the king that has done what no other king can do. Jesus is the one that has fulfilled the law when nobody else can do it. The idea isn't that you need a new king or you need to fulfill the law. It's that it's already done in Jesus. And this morning, if you will place yourself in service to him, if you'll be a part of that family, you will see all of these blessings fulfilled. If you want to be part of God's family, if you want to join the family of Jesus in baptism, or you pray for the church, would you come as we stand?